Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Well, that week stunk. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Spring is the season for new beginnings, and it's the best time to get behind the wheel of a sophisticated new Cadillac SUV. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo, and we have our first stinker of a week for our New York Mets of this season. Listen, it's a long season. These things happen. Joe, I think it's going to be a little bit of a therapy session. We're going to keep it real, as we always do. We're going to highlight some actual problems for this team right now. But how are you, my friend?
Connor, I'm doing all right, and it was bound to happen. Pretty much every episode it's been, hey, this is great. The Mets have won 2 in a row. Mets have won 3 in a row. Mets have won 6 in a row. It was bound to happen. We're going to have an episode where we came in and had to say, all right, things aren't going so hot. And as you said, that's the nature of a baseball season, ebbs and flows. And let's dive right into kind of what's going on.
Yeah, a 2-5 week for the Mets during our podcast week is how we kind of track things. They are 29-20 on the season. Obviously, the Braves have rebounded from a dreadful start. Of course, the Phillies and the Mets, I think, are going to be battling for first place all throughout this season. And I think things get magnified. Of course they do, Joe, when the Mets play the Yankees, right? They all count the same in the standings, but it feels a little bit different in New York. Now, the Mets only take 1 of 3 games. But this is more of a big picture conversation right now. And we're going to talk about the rotation, but the big picture conversation is surrounding the offense that is just ice cold right now. And with that has kind of had a trickle effect of some Juan Soto drama that we'll get into. But I think the simplest way to start this off, Joe, is that we knew at some point Pete Alonso would cool off. We knew at some point Francisco Lindor would come back down to earth a little bit. These guys are going to go through cold stretches after being sizzling hot. And the larger issue right now is, Joe, no one has been able to pick them up.
Yeah, Connor. Some of these things, some things are season-long kind of concerns. Like, for example, the Mets are hitting .214 with runners in scoring position this year. That's the 4th worst in baseball. That's a problem. But let's focus a lot more on kind of the last week, because prior to, a week ago, we had a much different vibe on the pod than we do today. Over the last 7 days, Francisco Lindor hitting .095 with a .374 OPS. Juan Soto hitting .176 with a .540 OPS. Pete Alonso, .182 with a .477 OPS. Brandon Nimmo, .136 with a .390 OPS.
Oh, man.
And Mark Vientos, .182 with a .436 OPS. So those are the hitters, 1, are paid a lot of money to perform, and 2, with Vientos, a young guy that just had such a great year last year, and the hope was to take that next step, towards superstardom. It's not, the world isn't falling apart, but this last week, it's been frustrating watching this Mets offense, even when they do get guys on. Which, shout out to Jeff McNeil and Tyrone Taylor, to be positive. They have had a great past week, but the stars just aren't playing like stars right now.
That's exactly it. And there's a trickle effect of just situational baseball, right? And you were texting me off air. They've actually been fine in terms of sac flies, but the hits with runners in scoring position, or lack thereof, any kind of hitting with runners in scoring position, has been abysmal for this team. I mean, their batting average with runners in scoring position right now is worse than the Rockies, who might win 35 games this year, it feels like at this point. I say that half jokingly, like they've actually been that bad. Now, I think we've glossed over this issue, admittedly, at times in this podcast, because when the team is winning and you have a small sample size with a season that is as long as baseball, it is easier to gloss over issues. As the season goes on, this is some simple math. You have a larger sample size, and things that are consistently a problem actually can be discussed about as a problem right now. The Mets have a runners in scoring position productivity problem right now. And there is 2 sides of it, Joe, because there's not always that easy press a button kind of fix. There's the side of it that you just highlighted, that the guys that are paid to do damage have to do damage. And while Juan Soto hasn't lived up to expectations very, very early in his first season as a Met, The larger issue from a productivity standpoint right now is Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos. Like there's Juan Soto will generate the headlines and talking points, and he brought some of that on himself. Like you got to run hard out of the box consistently. Like that's on Juan Soto, and you got to answer for that after the game. That is on Juan Soto. But Juan Soto was somebody that was also scorching through the first couple of weeks of May. And because of the contract he has, he's always going to be under the microscope. Brandon Nimmo is becoming now a sustained problem for this team. And we say it every single show. We love Brandon Nimmo. He obviously is a guy that, is a great ambassador for this team. But if you go back to the second half of last year, Joe, we are dangerously inching towards a full season sample size now, where we're going to have the second half of last year and the first half of this year, where Brandon Nimmo is nowhere near the player that not only is he paid and expected to be, but it's just kind of inexplicable to me. Even if you want to get away from that 2020 to 2021 stretch where his on-base percentage was over 400, and as it was in 2018, if you want to go more recent and look at 2022 to 2023, both those seasons where he was 363 and 367, he's at 277 right now, Brandon Nimmo. And that's what's led to a sub 700 OPS, is that Nimmo is not getting on base. And Nimmo is not producing with runners in scoring position when he is consistently batted in a slot that you need to drive runners in when guys are getting on in front of you. Because we say this all the time, even when Soto, by his standards, is slumping, Soto gets on base. Pete is in a very bizarre home run drought by his standards, but Pete naturally is going to bounce out of that. And Lindor is the starter for this team. And when he's not getting on base to kick off the game, you see the difference in the team. But these guys naturally, even at their lowest, are going to find ways to get on base. Vientos is a young player, but he's got to get going. But at some point, the clock it's going to get, late early, and the Mets are going to have to try someone else in that slot. And we'll have a larger conversation probably later in the show about Ronny Mauricio and Syracuse, obviously the return of Jeff McNeil, the ups and downs of Francisco Alvarez. But the bottom line is, Joe, you can really only continue to do this same thing with the same results for so long. I don't think the Mets would go into July with this same problem in the lineup.
I can't imagine so either. And Brandon Nimmo is definitely the guy that I'm looking at. And, we're going to talk about all the Juan Soto stuff. And as you said, Juan Soto has been good. He just hasn't been game-changing, which is what we expect. Francisco Lindor, been great. The last week hasn't been so good. Pete Alonso, home run drought, as you mentioned. Those are guys that you kind of know are going to turn it around. And we're getting closer, as you said, to that 1 year sample of Brandon Nimmo becoming a completely different player than he was. And I know some of this is approach that the Mets have pushed his direction. But look, there's always those games where, we're always texting throughout every single game. And it's just like, those were a couple good at-bats from Nimmo. Those were a couple vintage at-bats from Nimmo. And then it just kind of reverts back. And he's still hitting the ball hard. So you like to think at some point in time it's going to start to fall his way. But I want to see the Brandon Nimmo, as you see if you're watching on YouTube, a 277 on base percentage. I want to sign up for 100 points higher than that.
Right.
If you give me 70 points higher than that, we're at least getting in the right direction. I want Brandon Nimmo to find a way to balance the two. It seems like it's a tale of two players. As you said, like the 2019 through 2021 version of Brandon Nimmo is just focus on getting on base, walk, get on base, set the table for the guys behind you. He is now in a position in the lineup where he does need to produce more. That's just the nature of hitting cleanup or fifth in the order. Can we take a little bit of the 2019 to 2021 Brandon Nimmo and mix it in with this Brandon Nimmo that hits the ball hard? And, there is some bad luck involved to a degree, like the double play that he ground into in game one in Boston. Hit that on the nose. There was only one defender on the left side. He just happened to be right where the ball went. But there needs to be a lot more from Brandon Nimmo. There's no way around it. And we are at the point, as we both have said now, that we're getting to a sample size where we wonder, are we going to be able to get back to the Brandon Nimmo we knew?
And these aren't excuses, but the problem with my previous point is saying like, hey, you might have to try something else
Yeah.
eventually. Maybe
What
not
is there to
now.
try?
Jesse Winker being hurt is a big problem of
Yeah.
that because in theory, you'd probably just slot up Winker in that spot and maybe you reconfigure your lineup much differently in that scenario where it's Winker where Nimmo's hitting and then Vientos, obviously, for the balance. And then maybe you're even talking about McNeil and then Nimmo. Like you're putting Nimmo in towards the bottom of the lineup to try to get back to that ability to he's probably going to be leading off more innings. He's probably going to be trying to set the table. It's this could just be a fundamental disagreement between us and the Mets. And obviously this was a big combo, Joe, when you were out and we had Gelbs on the podcast. To me, Brandon Nimmo of 2022, where he only hit 16 home runs, but he hit 274 and got on base at a 367 clip. That's an 800 OPS. Sign me up for that all day, rather than the Brandon Nimmo who, for some reason, needs that extra 7 to 8 home runs, but the batting average drops 50 to 70 points, and the on base drops. I don't think he's going to finish the season with a 277 on base clip, but are we talking about him going under the 327 mark, career low he had last year? It's dangerously looking that way unless things drastically change. And we're not just, this isn't just putting the bullseye on Nimmo and saying he's all the problems with the Mets. That's not the point of this conversation. I think that it's a massive issue right now. And, you can only say it so many times before you just go, hey, Juan Soto has to be Juan Soto. And that just naturally has to happen. Now, a lot of drama has arrived with this. We knew things would kind of be amplified returning to Yankee Stadium. And I think that, my biggest point is, Joe, no matter what Juan Soto does or doesn't do, when you get that kind of contract, this is what comes with the territory. We on the Mets pod, we've already experienced this. And yes, it was a different magnitude of money, but at this time for this organization in this city, this was a conversation with Francisco Lindor for a really, really long time. There is an acclimation period. There's an adjustment period. And, maybe there's also a maturity period as well, which, you wouldn't expect to be the case with a veteran player, even for a younger player. But for Soto, like this is something that if you don't have your swing, your typical Juan Soto swing and confidence right now, don't make things harder on yourself and make it, even more focused on you with the lack of running to first base. That's a pretty low bar. And what was interesting to me, Joe, was even after the game with him kind of denying it, it was funny to me that he denied it in a ironic way because he stole second base after he didn't. And you and I texted right away. We were like, he was never getting a double on that. The way the ball flies off the monster, it would have been nice to see him run and then stop at first base. But him stealing second the way he did and how aggressive he was on the Bates pass against the Yankees tells me Juan Soto deep down internally knows he needs to find ways to make up for his lack of being himself in other ways right now, because that's not his bread and butter.
I'm going to say this, and it's going to be very unpopular because of just everything that's going on right now. There is not a hustle issue with Juan Soto. I've been watching this team all year. He's going first to third on singles to right. He's scoring from first on doubles. There's not a general hustle issue with Juan Soto. There are two specific incidents that just happen to be over the last few days that are accentuated by the Mets losing baseball games. And the ground ball that he did not run out against the Yankees is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah.
You run out ground balls that you hit up the middle. When I initially watched it, it was a check swing kind of thing. So I thought my just reaction initially was, oh, he didn't even know he put the ball in play. It was a check swing and it was kind of too late. And then after watching it more, that clearly was not the case. So there was no reason not to bust out of the box. And part of this too is there's a lot of conversation surrounding Juan Soto's not having fun. Juan Soto has no swagger. Juan Soto's not shuffling. And to a degree,
his family made him sign with the Mets.
His family basically forced him that he had to stay or sign with the Mets. At the end of the day, when I look at the Fenway game, and as you mentioned, he probably should have ran. I think he knew that he should have ran, and that's why he went and proceeded to steal second base on the first pitch. Just was not waiting. He was ready and he was going. But part of that too, on the other side of the coin, the Juan Soto swagger is watching balls he knows are home runs. And the wind really messed with the baseball that day. Pete Alonso hit one. Yeah, like the numbers that Gary Cohen brought up with exit velocity and launch angle in the StatCast era, no ball hit at Fenway Park to left field with those numbers did not get out. So the wind really messed with the baseball. That was the swagger of Juan Soto. When he knows he has one, he stops and he looks at it for a second. So it was a mixed bag of you got the swagger you wanted, but got the lack of hustle that you don't want to see. So there's a lot of conversation surrounding Soto, and big picture, I think everyone at their core thinks Juan Soto is going to be just fine, big picture. But the last week, he hasn't performed, and you combine that with losing baseball games and then the non-hustling and the comments after the fact. You got to learn when you can be honest and when you kind of have to say what you got to say to just move on to the next day. And, I commend honesty. We want to see honesty from our players, but there's just certain situations where you just go, hand up, I should have busted out of the box. I thought it was a home run. It wasn't. That was on me.
Move on.
So what I did, I stole second base right away because I knew that it was an error in judgment. And that's to me, I think the two incidents with Yankee Stadium and Red Sox are misjudgments by Soto, not he has a hustling problem.
Right. And like you said, Joe, there's a lot of people that, could be listening now and don't agree. There's a lot of people that naturally haven't liked Soto since he got that kind of contract. And that's not the conversation at hand here. And the problem I have is the conversation that's completely misconstrued is Juan Soto. It was funny when we flashed the numbers because I was looking at those numbers and I was like, God, those are the numbers we're dreaming of Brandon Nimmo to have. Like, but it's not Juan Soto numbers. But it doesn't mean that this is a disaster or what have the Mets done or he's not happy here or he made a giant mistake. It's an adjustment period. I've been a Met fan long enough, and I know you've been a Met fan long enough, that I've lived this with Mike Piazza briefly, lived it much longer with Carlos Beltran, lived it much longer with with Francisco Lindor. And it happens. This happened to Juan Soto in San Diego. After he got traded, he was way worse than this. And then in that second year, he really found himself again after that half of a season with them. So acclimating to new places and Pedro Martinez had a really, really good take on this on Twitter, kind of relating to it as well. And I have no panic meter here. I think people that are setting the panic meter or calling this 15-year contract a disaster or anything like that, it's shock value at this point, right? It's garnering it. Or you could just be mad that he didn't re-sign with the Yankees, or you could be mad that he got this contract when nobody else has it in the sport. There could be a lot of biased reasons. I say it all the time. I'm a biased Met fan. I root for the Mets. I want the Mets to do well. I try to be pretty fair, and I think you bring me back to life most often on this podcast. But at heart, I want what's best for the Mets. And I think putting all of that aside, it's just hard to sit here and say, God, what a mistake the Juan Soto situation is. And he's not going to revert back to being himself for a 26-year-old superstar. And a lot of that could be said for the Mets right now after we're having this conversation after a 2-5 week when the team is 29-20. And I'll say this, Joe, one last thought on the entire week as a whole before we get into some deeper lineup stuff. The Mets have a hell of an opportunity to kind of face adversity head on because you got the Dodgers coming to town. And all the talk leading up to the season was, have the Mets done enough to get over the hump of the Dodgers? Everybody in baseball is saying that. The Yankees are saying that after losing them in the World Series. The Padres are saying that with them in their division. The Mets are saying that in case they run them in the NLCS again. The Braves and the Phillies are thinking it as well. You go and you take a couple from the Dodgers in this situation. Well, it feels like everybody kind of comes back down to reality and level heads, cooler heads prevail.
Yeah, and look, Connor, the Dodgers are going through it a bit too. Like, no one's talking about it or noticing it. They got swept by the Angels over the weekend. And, they're going through their share of pitching injuries. Glasnow's down. Roki Sasaki is down. Blake Snell is down. Who could have guessed that Blake Snell or Tyler Glasnow might be hurt, but that's neither here nor there. So the Dodgers are going through their own struggles of a sort, and just a little bit different than the Mets. And I think, as you said, they have one more game here in Boston facing Garrett Crochet. As of this recording, the game hasn't happened yet. So yay if the Mets won and boo if they didn't. And then you come back home and get ready to face the Dodgers. And after this weekend, the nice schedule that the Phillies are getting, the Mets get that with the White Sox and Rockies. So there'll be a chance to really feast off of the lesser teams. And everyone will say you're beating bad teams. It doesn't matter, but it's all about regaining confidence. And the Mets need to regain some confidence because once runners get on, these hitters are the plan, the approach, it just hasn't looked right now over the last, call it week to 10 days. I'm not concerned big picture, but yeah, certainly you have an opportunity this weekend to change things against the Dodgers.
Somebody else needs to have a moment or two here in the bottom of this order because it can't always be Pete and Lindor. And yes, it has to be Juan Soto at some point, but the conversation really hovers around even beyond Nimmo and Vientos. You need some power from Francisco Alvarez. Jeff McNeil's been solid since he's been back, but you need Beatty to, obviously he's been up and down. He had the home run outburst, and then he's been phenomenal at third base, which is a much larger conversation. But you need some kind of spark at the bottom of the order while you're waiting for Winker to get back at DH. It's just not looking great for Marte right now. And the Mets had some of that in the beginning of the season. Like Torrens was off to a scalding start. Tyrone Taylor had some big moments. He wasn't always hitting for average, but he had some really, really clutch moments. The Mets kind of need to find that as well, and we'll talk about that maybe even down in the system. But let's get into the pitching quick, because lost in this 2-5 week is that outside of Tyler McGill at Yankee Stadium, this rotation is still performing at a high level, Joe. They're giving up more home runs, but they have the Mets in every single game. And most importantly, for as bad as the week was, these guys are finally giving the team some length as well.
They were bound to come back to earth on the home run numbers. They basically gave up 0 more or less. So
right.
They were bound to come back to earth a little bit there. What I want to shout out, Griffin Canning was excellent. He gave, the first home run, barely gets out of the place I played, pony ball at. But that, again, that one's neither
that's the
here
beast of playing there. Yeah.
Yeah. When you play in that stadium, and look, the Mets didn't take advantage. They
right.
didn't hit
exactly.
any home runs at Yankee Stadium, but Canning, again, so impressed with everything he does. And when you look at coming into the year, and we went into the lab on Canning, 2 or 3 weeks ago or whatever on this show, and he decreased his fastball usage, increased his slider usage, and it was more effective. Teams have access to that information too, and they're like, well, he's not going to throw fastballs. And Canning came out and was heavy fastball in that Yankee outing, and it was effective. So it's always that game of chess against the other team. So Canning really impressed, and Kodai Senga, for questions about his desire last year and questions about all those things, an absolute dog in a game where it was cold and windy and miserable out, which, by the way, we're getting Memorial Day weekend. Can we have just hot weather here soon enough?
I wouldn't expect it.
No, definitely not this weekend. Doesn't look that way. But Senga, after battling through 5, and as he's walking off, he gives that one to Mendoza, one more. And Mendoza, credit to him, could have easily been like, no, Kodai, you're good for today. He sided with his pitcher, let him go, and a great 6th inning from Senga. So yeah, starting pitching, we're in a really good spot. We're going to remain in a good spot. The bullpen has shown a couple warts here and there. Those injuries are building up a bit, but you still have a guy like Huáscar Brazoban pitching great. Max Kranick hit a little cold patch, and he's starting to regain form. So the bullpen's going to be a lot of, up and down a little bit throughout the year, but I feel like we can really rely on the starting rotation.
Absolutely. And this is without Sean Manaea right now. And it kind of brings me to a point, Joe. Manaea's not in this bucket, but Winker and Siri are. While they're not primary players on this team, the Mets, ironically, are missing their vibes players right now. They're sandpaper players. Like Winker is a personality on the team. Siri is a personality on the team. Manaea's in a much different light than those guys. I think those two are very, very intense. I think Manaea, though, it rubs off on everyone else right now. And it's not that he's not around, but when Manaea's pitch, like when Manaea goes out there at Citi Field and gives you 6 or 7 innings of 1 or 2 run ball, there's a different feel to it right now. And I think, the Mets, we knew it would be a little bit of a transition this year, not just letting Iglesias, walk and retiring some gimmicks, because you always need new gimmicks, But there's a reason why those guys are back for more than just the players they are. It's the type of personalities they are on the team. And ironically, I'd say three of their biggest personalities for different reasons are down with injuries right now. And that's, once again, they're not season-ending injuries. That's just the flow of a season, and you got to wait for some of those reinforcements. Let's go down on the farm here, Joe. And we got a lot of positive down on the farm news right now that I know you like to see. Jett Williams heating up in Double-A right now, where, man, I'm hoping we see Jett in Triple-A and kind of ride this wave right now. And then Jonah Tong. I mean, Jonah Tong is just answering the bell every single time right now, where you just wonder, when is Jonah Tong gonna hit a hurdle throughout his development is what I'm asking now, Joe. 6 innings pitched, see right there, 2 hits, no earned runs. This was on May 17th, 8 strikeouts and only 2 walks. Just professional outing after professional outing from Tong in the system.
I was actually at this start in Hartford, and Tong looked fantastic, Connor. It was on the stadium gun, which is all I have because I'm not going to pay the money for a real radar gun. Sitting 93 to 95, I saw some 97s. He was going after hitters, and that's what's really big, and he is trending in that right direction. Because one thing, talking to some people, they said the one thing which may not sound like a negative, but in a way it is, he wants to strike every single hitter out. Instead of trusting his stuff and being in the zone, if he gets ahead, he'll bury the curveball down. He'll throw the gyro slider low and away. He'll try to go up with a cutter to change the eye level. So he's expanded his arsenal this year, but the last few starts, you're starting to see him go after hitters. And it was really impressive against Hartford, as you see the stat line below. Only 2 hits, struck out 8 guys, walked a couple, which is okay. And exactly dating back to his start before, where he had the 6 2/3 perfect. He was perfect to get to exactly 9 innings between those 2 starts before he gave up a hit. But over his last 5, Connor, these numbers are just, it's what I would do against you in MLB The Show.
You're not wrong.
25 innings, 10 hits, 2 earned runs, 9 walks, 48 strikeouts. Just silly. It's a .72 ERA and a 115 batting average against. Jonah Tong is moving into that tier where, I had him as the number 7 ranked prospect in the system coming into the season. He's going to be going up in the next update. He's moving, I think, into that tier of pitching prospect where it's not just this could be a future big league starter. This has a chance to be a future, number 3 or better type of starter if he continues on the trajectory that he is.
1 home run in 34 innings pitched while striking out almost 16 over 9. I mean, how much longer, Joe, did the Mets burn innings in Double-A with Tong, who's going to turn 22 this year?
It's an interesting question. I think they have historically been pretty aggressive. So it won't shock me if he has another great start, if he gets called up, or it could be, maybe a month from now. That you want to be smart with your players where you're properly challenging them, but you also want to make sure they're set up for some level of success at the next level. And then there's the numbers game involved. Like they have, Brandon Waddell and some, veteran type of guys at AAA right, that you certainly want to keep in that rotation to be stretched out. But hey, you can only keep a guy down pitching this well. You can only keep him down for so long.
And for Jett Williams, OPS over 900 now. He's got 4 home runs. He's hitting a little below 300. He's at 292. He's getting on base at a 388 clip. 9 stolen bases already. I mean, Jett is healthy and making things happen, Joe, and still just 21 years old, Jett Williams. So maybe this is one they're a little bit more delicate with, but we know Jett's mindset from just, kind of being around him in spring training a little bit and how confident he is. He's the guy in the lineup to really watch here because all the talent is there for him to kind of skyrocket to make it a Triple-A before he turns 22 years old.
The top 3 in Binghamton's order. So just a quick little shout out to Nick Morabito and Ryan Clifford, who are also having huge Mays. But Jett in May, not too far off from the numbers you see for total season, but 294 average, 429 on base, and 529 slug, a 958 OPS in the month of May. And he hit a home run in Hartford the day before I was there. that really stood out to me. It was a fastball up, took it out to right center. That is a sign of a hitter that's just seeing the ball really well, and a guy that has more power than I think his body would suggest. We could talk about he's 5'6" probably on a good day, but he's a thickly built, strong kid. And what has stood out for me, Connor, the walks are back.
Yep.
When Jett came back last year off the wrist injury, you could tell he was just trying to get going again. And in April, the strikeouts were a bit high and the walks were okay. They weren't quite at the level, but in the month of May, he has 12 walks against only 8 strikeouts in 16 games. This right now is the Jett Williams that I had ranked as the number 1 prospect in the system and have been high on since the Mets drafted. I think it's just he is now finally comfortable from that gap of time that he had without playing due to the wrist injury from last year. And, won't be shocked if Jett Williams ends up at the top of that prospect list again when I do reorder it.
And he has a package of traits that this team will need within the 2-year window, and that is the ability to get on base and speed. And that's going to be really, really important for this Mets team. So,
and Connor, one thing to add on Jett, I still want to see him play more positions.
Me too.
He played center field the day I was there, and Jonah Tong was on the mound, so nothing eventful happened in the field.
Take a nap in the grass.
He just hung out. I think he caught a couple like can of corn, lazy fly balls into center, so there was nothing really to see there.
But he moves well, Joe.
No, he's an athlete. Yeah. Like I have no question he could play any of the 3 up the middle spots. I just want to physically see it more. This year, so far, 24 games at short, 4 games in center, and 1 game at second base. So I need to figure out the rationale here, but I think we're getting to the point where we need to start seeing Jett get more reps at second base, more reps at center field, because I think this is a future big leaguer, a future member of this Mets lineup. And I want to know ahead of time where he is most comfortable and where the Mets are most comfortable playing him.
You're listening to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every show on SMY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, an ugly week for the Mets show and an ugly week for the scoreboard. Over-under push was at 1 for Francisco Alvarez home runs. We both went under. He didn't hit one. We both got a point. Yes or no, will the Mets win the Subway Series? We both said yes. They did not. No points. Yes or no, will Juan Soto hit at least 1 home run in the Subway Series? We both said yes. He did not. No points. Over-under push was at 9 for Juan Soto hits. Joe, you pushed. I went over. He only had 4. Now, to be fair, Carlos Rodon wanted nothing to do with Juan Soto, but when he did get his chances, he did not have enough hits. No points awarded. Over-under push was at 3 for the starters going 6 innings. Joe, you pushed. I went under. They went over this mark. 4 starters went 6 innings. No points awarded. Over-under push was at 4 for Mets wins. Joe, you went over. I pushed. They only won 2 games. No points awarded. We only had the first one, the Francisco Alvarez home runs under. So 1 point on the week for each of us. I still lead the season series by a point, 23-22. We got a 5-pack for 5 games. 1 more against the Red Sox, 3 against the Dodgers, 1 against the White Sox. Over under push at 5 for Juan Soto hits, Joe. 5 games. He needs 5 hits. I'll start us off this week.
Yeah, you're in the lead.
I'm going to keep pressing the over. Because when you're down right now and we're talking about players like eventually regressing or getting back to the mean. It was naturally going to happen with Lindor. It was naturally going to happen with Pete. It's just naturally going to happen with Soto. And it's like, this is my new, well, to be fair, he actually has gone over this before, but this is becoming my new Marte home run. I'm still going to take the over, Joe.
Connor, I'm going to join you. And I wasn't sure how you were going to go on the Juan Soto thing because just doesn't look so good right now, but get him back to Citi Field. And, we don't need to have the conversation about booing and rounds of applause and all that. Let's get Juan Soto back home. Let's get some hits going. So I will also join you with the over on Juan Soto hits.
Well, and the Dodgers, which is the meat here of our scoreboard contest, 3 of the 5 games. I mean, Joe, in a 3-game set against the Angels, they gave up 23 runs in 3 games. And then against the Diamondbacks, they've given up 12 in the last 2 games. So the Dodgers pitching we know how good the Dodgers are, but they're not only banged up, they're just not very good right now. They need to hit their way to victories. So I'll bet on hopefully a bounce back for Soto here. Yes or no? Will the Mets hit a home run? Just kidding. Will Brandon Nimmo hit a home run? Joe, 5 games for Nimmo to hit a home run.
I will say no. I'll say Nimmo will not hit a home run. But look, that's right now. I hate to say it. That's kind of what we're hoping Brandon Nimmo is able to do based on how he's kind of approaching at bats right now. But I'll say no, he won't hit a home run.
So I'll run this one the same way I ran the Alvarez one last week. Nimmo probably across these 5 games will be an average of plus 700 each day to hit a home run. Like everything with the analytics here should tell you to take the no, because the odds are if you place that bet 5 times, the odds are it won't hit. But man, Joe, he's so streaky with power. He's not streaky as a hitter. He's just been bad as a hitter. There's no denying that. But power has been very streaky. So I'll take the yes. I'll take the risk here. I'll say Nimmo finds one because Nimmo doesn't have to get hot to hit a home run. It feels like really all his hits, it feels like these days are just home runs. Over-under pushes at 3 for Tyrone Taylor hits. Now, he's been playing a lot here, Joe. So you feel good about him probably playing 4 of these 5 games. I'll actually push. I'll go with a push for Taylor and go right at 3 hits.
I'm going to push as well. I think Tyrone is one of the guys that he's actually having some really good at bats, and he's getting on base, and we're just not, and we're just not noticing it because coming up after him are some guys that aren't exactly executing with runners on base. But yeah, I'll push. I like what I'm seeing from Tyrone Taylor, and that's not what we could say about a lot of the order right now.
Over-under push is at 3 for starters going 6 innings, Joe. This one surprised both of us last week.
I will go under. I think it's going to be close, but while the Dodgers are giving up a lot of runs, their offense is still a really good unit, and they are largely healthy. So I don't know if they're going to be able to push too many past or into the 6 inning range. So I'll go under.
Yeah, I'm going to go under here as well. It's only 5 games, 3 out of 5. You got the Dodgers lineup, and you have an off day, Joe, on Thursday that does play into this number, because if the bullpen's rested going into the weekend, the Mets might not be so determined to push guys an extra inning or an extra batter here or there. We've seen them get to 5 2/3 and be like, I don't know at this spot. So I'm going to go with the under as well. If I was picking an exact number, I think it'll be closer to 2 of the 5. Our last one here, Mets wins. Over-under push is at 3 of the 5 games. I'll push. I say the Mets win 3 of the 5 here. I don't think they just completely bounce back to the level they were playing at, but I think they even out a little bit more here, Joe.
You know what, Connor? We need some differences here. I think we agree a little too much for my liking, and this show has been largely not as optimistic, I would say, as we usually are. But look, this team, to me, still, regardless of what anyone wants to say, they are too good to stay down for too long. So I will actually say that they will go over. I will say they will win 4, which would be obviously a big number, and maybe this is one I look back at and don't feel too great about it. But I'm choosing to try to be glass half full going forward. We're looking back on the past week that wasn't so good, but looking ahead, just sneak out a Red Sox game
against Garrett Crochet.
That's okay. Sneak it out. I mean, Red Sox bullpen has been abused the last couple of days, so sneak out that win. Take 2 out of 3 against LA, and just don't lose to the White Sox. Boom, you got 4.
That's the key. Yeah, that's the key. Let's jump into the mailbag here. We got a Nimmo doubleheader from 5-star reviews. Thank you to Jamama's house, 5-star review. Nimmo was at his best when he was in the leadoff spot and changed his approach when he was bumped for Lindor. Did the Mets ruin Nimmo? And then Dr. Bones 5 said it's been 1 year since Nimmo stopped leading off. Can his offensive troubles be traced to this change? This is damned if you do, damned if you don't, Joe. Like, Lindor has been a star in the leadoff spot, and Nimmo has been struggling significantly out of the leadoff spot, but Nimmo has also changed who he is as a hitter. I don't know if just batting Nimmo leadoff gets him right back to the guy that was getting on base between a 360 and 400 clip.
Right. I don't think it's that simple where it's just, oh, now I'm batting first, so I don't have to try to just hit the ball really hard and be aggressive earlier in counts and chase fastballs and chase certain pitches. I don't think that's something that you just flick a switch and all of a sudden he's just back to being Brandon Nimmo the way he was. Did the Mets ruin Nimmo in the sense of the type of player that we have known Brandon Nimmo as throughout his career? How can we right now say they haven't changed Nimmo? I don't want to say ruined. I think that's I think it's a little harsh, but they have changed.
Not DFAing Nimmo.
No, definitely not. But he certainly has changed the type of hitter and the way he approaches at bats, and leaving the leadoff spot, no question, has had a role in that. It's not so much just exiting the leadoff spot; it's where he's hitting now. You're hitting cleanup, hitting fifth. There's a requirement to really become more of a run producer. So it's a convoluted situation, and I actually don't know the way out of it.
Well, let me ask my own mailbag question to you then, Joe, after hearing your exact response. And I've seen some subtle chatter of this on Twitter, but not a ton. Do the Mets have an Eric Chavez problem here? I mean, we've used the words approach and situational awareness and hitting the ball into the ground for 80% of this podcast today.
Yeah, Connor, look, it's always a mixed bag, right? And I always find it really funny when we have these type of conversations. When guys are hitting, boy, these hitters are so good. And when they're not, dang, those coaches stink. They can't get them hitting. So
that's sports.
That's sports for you. But look, I think everything needs to be evaluated. And there certainly has been some inconsistencies offensively here. Over the last year or so that Eric Chavez retook over the hitting coach job. So yeah, by no means is Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes abstained of any, I guess, blame for what's going on right now, but it's ultimately on the hitters to perform. I think is my general takeaway.
All right. Our last one here from Matty Rolls. Where does Mauricio fit on this team if he catches fire? Who's the odd man out if he does come up? Is it Azekar? And Acuna is your backup center fielder. I mean, by the way, Mauricio, 5-9 in Syracuse. There was 2 games through return, hit an absolute missile. Joe, it's a very small sample size, but if Mauricio just gets up to a scorcher in Syracuse and the bottom of the Mets lineup does absolutely nothing to perform, there's going to be a conversation to be had about how quickly can we get Ronny Mauricio back up at Citi Field.
No doubt about it. And I still think right now he's still getting his legs under him. He's still getting his timing right. So it's not like they're not hitting right now. So call Mauricio up, call up Drew Gilbert, just call up kids. We need to change something.
Change the team.
Yeah, you don't need to change the team necessarily yet, but Mauricio, as he gets healthier, as he gets his timing right, there's no question that he's going to be pushing for a spot on this team. He's playing a lot of second base and third base. I think the Mets are doing a good job of kind of keeping him off of shortstop. I don't think much of a reason to be playing him there. And where he fits, I think that's going to come down to, I hate to kind of give maybe a lame-ish answer, where the Mets are at that point in time. Has Brett Baty taken a stranglehold of third base where his offense has caught up to his defense on a more consistent level? At second base, do you want to play Jeff McNeil more in center field, or does his play fall off where Mauricio wants to come up and replace him? But I think there is no debate of at this point is the Mets envision Ronny Mauricio being a significant factor of this team in 2025. It's just a matter of when and where specifically on the diamond. And it's going to be either second or third. Those are his spots. If you wanted me to just look ahead and take a guess, I'll say he ends up being maybe the more primary third baseman as we move closer to the second half. And, not that I don't believe in Brett Baty, but he needs to prove that his offense can be as consistent as his defense has been.
This is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Spring is the season for new beginnings, and it's the best time to get behind the wheel of a sophisticated new Cadillac SUV. The beginning of something exceptional starts now. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer. Remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SMY's YouTube channel where you could leave us questions. You could also leave us a review with a question. We'll look for those for our future mailbags. Of course, become a subscriber on SMY's YouTube channel. You will never miss a show. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.